when they look at audience-based navigation, they ask themselves, well, is this a page about that group or for that group? And funnily enough, that simple confusion can completely prevent people taking that leap. Something that comes up again and again in B2B website discussions, strategy, and projects is the conundrum of audience-based navigation. It's an attractive idea to have information about your audiences on your website, and in some situations it's tempting to serve multiple audiences equally and simultaneously with your website's information architecture and UX. But it comes with problems, and today on Websites Decoded, I'd like to talk about this very common recurring issue and help you navigate through that. Did you know that most businesses only use 20% of their data? That's like trying to solve a puzzle with 80% of the pieces missing, or paying for a coffee that's only 1/5 full. Point is, you miss a lot, unless you use HubSpot. Their customer platform gives you access to the data you need to grow your business. The insights trapped in emails, call logs and transcripts, all that unstructured data that makes all the difference. Because when you know more, you grow more. And when you get a full cup of coffee, you can do more too. But I digress. Visit HubSpot.com today. Audience-based navigation. When businesses think about their website, they typically all agree that it should include product information, service information, contact information, evidence like case studies and things like that. And they're dead right about it. The other thing that very frequently comes up is the desire to have some sort of audience-based element to it. This probably appears in two main fashions. One is the audience menu. So the menu item that contains the sectors that you work in, the buyer types or personas that you serve, or the use cases or solutions that you offer, but around who you serve and in what context, what industry or category. And so that's a menu of content, and it's pages that you've got to create and populate. And then the other version of this is the multi-audience website, where businesses serve two or more audiences that require different information and different content, and that can produce a challenge in terms of how to present that information in a way that satisfies the organization's view of each audience being treated appropriately, in some cases equally, in some cases unequally, but appropriately. But there are challenges with this, significant challenges. The NN Group, Nielsen Norman Group, whom I frequently refer to, did the research on this, and we see it reflected in the website data that we are privy to. And the issues are this. So when you present audience choices, sectors, users, audience navigation, the problem is your visitors very often don't know which group to choose. Although it might seem and feel like the labels that you give those pages, the way that you segment that content is crystal clear, it very often isn't. Those pages are very often not mutually exclusive, meaning that people who visit your website don't instantly see that there is only one page that they could possibly go to and belong in. And so it creates confusion for them about which content, if they look at it at all, by the way, is the right page for them. Immediately, the next question that sort of crops up is, well, does this page that I might click on, and every click is a decision that requires cognitive load from a visitor, and although a click is a very simple action, it actually takes quite a lot for us to get a buyer to click on something. When they look at audience-based navigation, they ask themselves, well, is this a page about that group or for that group? And funnily enough, that simple confusion can completely prevent people taking that leap. There's a sort of resistance to go somewhere where you don't think you want to end up. in B2B website visit behavior. And so the problem of the page saying, a simple industry name means the visitor doesn't know whether it's about it or for it, and as a result, it doesn't get clicked. If you're enjoying this show, let me recommend another one from the HubSpot podcast network, Science of Scaling, hosted by Mark Roberge. Mark sits down with the most successful sales leaders in tech to uncover the strategies behind scaling growth, real playbooks from billion-dollar companies. His recent episode with Okta's co-founder Frederick Kerrist tackles a critical lesson. Every founder needs to sell, and you can't outsource it too early. If you're building a business, this one's essential. Listen to Science of Scaling wherever you get your podcasts. The process of getting people to self-identify and choose an audience, either to navigate your website, in its entirety, or to find key content, is an additional step that is not part of the task they're there to complete. Every visitor that comes to your website knows exactly what industry they are in, what problems they need to solve, and for the most part, like what the use cases might be, for a product that might solve their problems. They are not there to learn more about their own industry, their own role. They're there to perform a different task, which is to find information to solve their problems. So asking an audience, a visitor to choose an audience to access that content is an additional step that doesn't add value to them. And nor does the information in those pages align with the task they're on your website to complete. Another factor that challenges the efficacy of the audience-based content on your website is simply that it isn't distinct from the other content in your website information architecture, either in other sections, products, services, solutions, or within each page. It's probably quite repetitive and not discrete. So there's a cost to producing every page, there's a cost to building the information architecture around it and the UX, and there's a cost of creating and maintaining the content, some of which is duplicated and most of which is not distinct or unique from other pages on your website or aligned to the task a buyer is there to perform. The result is that no matter how hard you try, user clicks on the audience-based part of your website navigation will be very low as 6% in one particular case that we saw relatively recently, and lower in others, I'm sure. And if you've got an audience-based split in your business, presenting those two things as part of your navigation is going to force an additional click, which is going to increase the effort that it takes buyers to visit to understand your website and your offering, increase URL length unnecessarily, and things like that. So in most cases, my advice for B2B websites is audience-based content on the navigation isn't required. Certainly not during the intensive and important process of creating a new website to try and improve business outcomes and results. That is something that you want to defer until later at the very least, and not make a priority when you've got limited budget, constrained time, and KPIs that you want to hit. Audience-based content is having a bit of a renaissance within the AEO strategy, and that's something that you should definitely research. Check out Demand Decoded, our other podcast, for insights into how to tackle AEO, and information about industries and use cases and solutions and how you help buyers is incredibly valuable there. But that does not warrant a navigational approach and upfront content on your website with the costs that it incurs. When it comes to your multi-audience website, this is a trickier problem, but the very best approach that you can adopt is simply identify which of your audiences is the primary audience, the priority audience, and check that the relationship between the audiences is asymmetrical, in the sense that leading with one won't have an overly negative consequence on the opinion or the or the feeling of the other about the business that you offer. And very often these audiences are in some sort of like friction with one another or competition, two sides of a marketplace, for example. In the Airbnb case, it's the hosts and the guests, but in a lot of businesses it's the customers and the suppliers of a marketplace. And build your information architecture around the primary audience, lead with the content for the primary audience, and have navigation to your secondary audience prominently visible. Very common to see these in utility navs now above the main navigation bar, so that audience can route themselves intuitively and easily to the content that's relevant for them, but without making your primary audience, or the audience that makes your business attractive to that secondary audience, work harder to find the content that they need. A simple link is good. You don't need a toggle or anything interactive that might encourage people to click for dopamine and distract themselves away from the words, the all-important words on your website and images. So keep it simple, but do provide a route that's easy to take without putting audience selection in between your visitor and the content that they need. Here's a quick story from us at Blend and our customer, Daytel. Daytel were launching a completely new product into a brand new market with a different type of buyer. To do this effectively, they knew they needed to rebrand, overhaul their website, and rethink their go-to-market. We partnered with them to achieve this, transforming their brand, rebuilt the website and their new identity, working with them long-term to shift from lead generation to demand generation. The impact? 35% more revenue, 63% more profit, and 800% ROI from marketing, and a HubSpot Impact Award to recognize the success. This is what happens when you have a partner who has strategic, creative, and technical expertise all working together. If you're in a similar place and want to discuss how we help your businesses grow, just head over to blendb2b.com.